He was a billionaire, ready to destroy his maid's life over a secret. But the DNA test he demanded exposed a truth that shattered his entire world. The twist of destiny was so shocking, it rewrote his family's history forever. A truly life-changing surprise. Have you ever felt your kindness was mistaken for weakness? That no matter how hard you work, the world seems designed to crush the good-hearted? That feeling of profound injustice is exactly where our incredible story begins today. This is the journey of Joyce Mills, the humble maid, and Frederick Olson, the cruel billionaire who saw her as nothing but a threat. He forced her into a humiliating DNA test to disown her son, but what he uncovered was a deep family secret, a shocking plot twist that no one, least of all him, ever saw coming. This is the ultimate rich man, poor woman drama. Get ready for an emotional roller coaster. This is more than just a simple love story. It's a tale of power, being humiliated, and ultimately, a quiet but powerful revenge. This story of romance and intense drama proves that true love and destiny are forces you can never truly control. What you're about to witness is a heart-aching story that will leave you absolutely breathless. If you believe that the truth always wins in the end, show your support by liking this video. Comment below with the one word that describes his attitude right now. Share this with someone who needs proof that justice exists. And subscribe so you don't miss a single second of this unbelievable journey. In the austere, glass-walled boardroom perched high above the city, Frederick Olson, a man forged from steel and suspicion, delivered his chilling ultimatum. The air, already thin at this altitude, seemed to vanish entirely as he spoke. "We will proceed with a DNA test," he declared, his voice not loud, but a low, resonant blade that sliced through the silent deference of his legal team. This was not a discussion, it was the final, unappealable judgment from a king in his castle, a declaration of his absolute and unyielding power. He was a modern-day monarch, a billionaire whose empire was built on the bones of his competitors and the unwavering belief in his own superiority. The Olson legacy was a religion to him, a sacred text he was sworn to protect from any and all corruption. He saw the world not as a place of people, but as a chessboard of assets and liabilities. Every decision was a calculated move to fortify his position, to seal the airtight vault of his inheritance against the unworthy hands he imagined grasping for it. The target of this cold, strategic maneuver was a woman who was in his world less than a ghost, Joyce Mills, the family's unassuming maid. The demand for the test was designed to be a public spectacle, a surgical strike against her character executed before the very eyes of his inner circle. He needed witnesses to her downfall. This was a lesson, a warning to anyone who might ever dream of challenging the established order. This was the ultimate expression of a rich man, poor woman dynamic, weaponized for maximum impact. In his mind, her son was not a child but a potential Trojan horse, a biological key forged to unlock a fortune he was not entitled to. The concept of an illegitimate heir was anathema to him, a stain upon the pristine fabric of his family's narrative. He was convinced this was a lone con, a desperate and pathetic attempt at a cash grab, and it disgusted him to his core. The drama was, in his view, entirely of her making, and he was simply the force of order putting an end to it. With a flick of his wrist, he gestured to the papers on the polished mahogany table. "Have her served immediately," he instructed his lead counsel, his tone leaving no room for questions or delays. The legal documents were his weapons, each clause a carefully sharpened spear aimed at the heart of her credibility. He felt a grim satisfaction, the cold thrill of a predator closing in on its prey. He was purging a threat, cleansing his house of a perceived impurity with ruthless efficiency. This act of supreme arrogance was, however, the first stone cast in an avalanche he could not foresee. He believed he was cementing his control, reinforcing the walls of his kingdom against a potential siege. In reality, he was unknowingly turning a key in a lock he never knew existed, a lock that guarded a profound family secret. The demand for this test was the beginning of a truly shocking, emotional, and utterly life-changing saga. The ripples of his decision spread out from that boardroom, destined to touch every corner of his carefully constructed world. He thought he was closing a chapter, ending a minor annoyance with a show of force. But destiny, that unseen and often ironic force, had a far more intricate plot twist in mind. This was not an ending. It was the explosive beginning of an unbelievable love story, one that would challenge everything he held to be true and redefine his entire existence. Joyce Mills moved through the opulent, echoing halls of the Olson mansion with a practiced quietness, making herself as small and unobtrusive as possible. She was by trade and by temperament an eraser of imperfections, a polisher of surfaces, the maid who ensured the glittering world of her employers remained pristine. To them, she was part of the scenery, a uniform without a face, a pair of hands that silently served. But within her was a universe of quiet dignity and fierce love. She was a single mother, and every floor she scrubbed, every window she cleaned, was a testament to her devotion to her young son. He was the sun around which her entire world revolved, the reason she endured the cold indifference of her job. This opulent prison was her son's lifeline, the source of the food on their table and the roof over their head. Her kindness and hardworking nature were not for show, they were the very fabric of her soul, the tools she used to build a life from scratch. The contrast between her and the master of the house, Frederick Olson, was a chasm that could not be bridged. He was arrogance and power personified, a man who walked as if he owned the very air others breathed. She was humility and grace, a woman whose wealth was measured not in dollars, but in the depth of her character. Their two worlds, one of a cruel billionaire and the other of a kind mother, existed in a state of constant, unspoken collision within the mansion walls. Her diligent work was a form of meditation, a way to quiet the anxieties that came with her precarious position. She took pride in her tasks, finding a small measure of peace in bringing order to the chaos, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil that defined the family she served. Her quiet dignity was her armor, a shield against the daily slights and the palpable disdain that radiated from her employer. She was a silent observer of a deeply unhappy family, a witness to the emptiness that wealth could not fill. This stark reality of the rich man-poor woman divide was her daily existence. She saw firsthand how money could corrupt, how it could build walls so high that genuine human connection could never scale them. She wanted nothing of their world, save for the meager wage that allowed her to provide for her own. Her dream was not of riches, but of a simple, peaceful life, a safe harbor for herself and her son, far away from this gilded cage. She was utterly unaware that she was the central figure in a brewing storm, the unsuspecting protagonist in a high-stakes drama. As she meticulously cleaned the opulent mansion, her mind was on school supplies and her son's upcoming birthday, not on the legal machinations being plotted against her. Her focus was on survival, on maintaining her quiet existence, ignorant of the shocking accusation that was about to shatter her world and set her on a life-changing path. Joyce Mills, in her simple, hard-working grace, represented a truth that Frederick Olson could not comprehend, that true worth has nothing to do with a bank account. Her integrity, a quality he saw as a weakness to be exploited, was in fact her greatest strength. This silent, powerful virtue was about to be put to the ultimate test, a trial by fire that would reveal a stunning family secret and spark a most unexpected romance. Frederick Olson was a man imprisoned by his own inheritance. The immense weight of his family's legacy was a crushing burden, a ghostly presence that whispered constant warnings of failure and inadequacy in his ear. His obsession with preserving the Olson name was ill-consuming, a pathological fear of dilution or taint. This paranoia was the lens through which he viewed the world, coloring every interaction and turning potential allies into suspected enemies, a sad fate for a powerful billionaire. He treated Joyce Mills with a special kind of contempt, a disdain born from a deep-seated prejudice against her class and her perceived vulnerability. In his cynical worldview, her poverty made her dangerous, her kindness a manipulative tool. He saw her and her son not as human beings, but as a calculated threat, a potential flaw in the otherwise perfect blueprint of his succession plan. The idea that she could be genuine was a possibility his mind simply could not entertain. His heart had been hardened by years of brutal corporate warfare and the endless, subtle betrayals of his own family members. Empathy was a foreign language to him, a weakness he had long ago excised from his emotional vocabulary. He viewed Joyce's quiet dignity as a facade, her hard work a performance designed to lull him into a false sense of security. This deeply cynical perspective made it easy for him to justify the cruelty he was planning. It was not an attack, but a preemptive defense. The constant, poisonous whispers of his scheming relatives only served to fertilize the barren ground of his suspicion. They played upon his deepest fears, speaking of honor and bloodlines while their eyes gleamed with greed. They saw Joyce and her son as a potential obstacle to their own ambitions, and Frederick, blinded by his obsession, became their willing executioner. The looming drama was a carefully orchestrated play, and he was unknowingly its tragic main character. He looked upon her child, an innocent boy, and saw only a symbol of a potential usurpation. Every time their paths crossed in the vast mansion, he would analyze the boy's features, searching for some resemblance, some proof to confirm his dark theories. This obsession twisted his perception, turning a child into a pawn in a game of power and inheritance. He was preparing for a battle over a future heir, a battle that existed only in his mind. And so, he resolved to act, to use the full, crushing weight of his power to eliminate this perceived threat. He saw himself as the righteous guardian of his family's destiny, and Joyce Mills was the serpent he needed to cast out of his garden. He had no inkling that his actions were setting in motion a chain of events, a shocking plot twist that would lead not to his victory, but to his own undoing and a revelation of true love in its most unexpected form. This profound misjudgment, this utter failure to see the humanity in the woman who quietly cleaned his home, was the fatal flaw in his character. He was a man who could read a balance sheet with surgical precision, but was completely illiterate when it came to the human heart. His decision to proceed with the DN, a test, was not just a mistake, it was a catastrophic error that would trigger a life-changing and deeply emotional journey of discovery. As Frederick's paranoia metastasized, fed by the constant stream of insincere concerns from his relatives, it evolved from a passive suspicion into an active, malevolent strategy. He convinced himself that a direct confrontation was too simple. He needed to unmask Joyce Mills, to expose the duplicity he was certain lay hidden beneath her serene exterior. Thus began his cruel and silent campaign of planting subtle traps, a series of moral landmines designed to make her stumble and reveal her true nature. His first gambit was a masterclass in temptation, or so he believed. He left a designer wallet, ostensibly forgotten, on a mahogany side table in a secluded parlor she was scheduled to clean. The wallet was overflowing with crisp $100 bills, a lure for someone he saw as desperate. From the shadowy feed of a security camera, he watched, his heart a tight knot of anticipation, waiting for the moment of betrayal that would confirm all his biases against the Maid. But the betrayal never came. Joyce discovered the wallet, her movements unhurried and calm. She didn't even glance at the money. Instead, with the simple, straightforward honesty that defined her, she picked it up and immediately delivered it to the head of household staff, logging it as a lost item. Frederick watched the screen, a muscle twitching in his jaw. The test had failed, not her. The grace with which she passed only infuriated him more. Undeterred, the billionaire escalated his cynical game. His next trap was more insidious, targeting not just greed but ambition. He left a sensitive corporate document on his desk, marked strictly confidential, hinting at a stock merger that would be priceless information. He envisioned her snapping a picture of it, selling the secret, proving that everyone had a price. Yet, she dusted around the document with meticulous care, its world-altering contents utterly ignored. Her integrity was a fortress he could not breach. His scheming relatives watched his efforts with a mixture of amusement and impatience. "She's clever, Frederick," his cousin would whisper, stoking the fires of his frustration. "A woman like that knows how to play the long game. She won't be caught by such simple tricks." Their goading was the poison he willingly drank, pushing him further down the path of his dark obsession, making him more determined to find the flaw that had to be there. Each time Joyce passed one of his tests with her quiet, unassuming grace, it did not ease his paranoia, it intensified it. In his twisted logic, her consistent honesty was not proof of her good character, but evidence of a far more cunning and patient scheme. He couldn't accept the simple truth. This repeated failure to expose her as a fraud solidified his conviction that only a public, inescapable truth, scientific certainty of a DNA test could finally bring her down. This series of failed entrapments was a crucial part of the escalating drama. He thought he was testing her, but in reality, destiny was testing him. He was being given chance after chance to see the truth, to recognize the goodness standing right in front of him. But he was blind. His heart, so shielded by wealth and suspicion, was incapable of seeing her light. This blindness would lead directly to a shocking and deeply emotional confrontation that would change his life forever. In the cold, gilded cage of the Olson mansion, there was a single source of genuine warmth: Matilda Olson, Frederick's elderly and ailing grandmother. Largely confined to her lavish suite, she was the family's forgotten conscience, a living relic of a time when the Olson name was associated with more than just ruthless acquisition. She alone possessed the wisdom to look past Joyce Mills's uniform, to see the kind and gentle soul within the woman who worked as her maid. Joyce, in turn, treated Matilda with a profound kindness that transcended her professional duties. This was not an act of service, it was an act of friendship. She would often linger after her tasks were done, reading aloud from Matilda's favorite books, or simply listening as the old woman recounted stories from a bygone era. These were moments of quiet connection, a secret alliance of two gentle hearts in a house starved of genuine affection. A heart-aching bond was forming. This secret friendship became Joyce's refuge, a small island of peace in the turbulent sea of her daily life. With Matilda, she wasn't invisible, she was seen and valued. The matriarch would speak of her late husband with love, and of her son Frederick's father with a deep and sorrowful complexity. He built an empire. Matilda would confide in Joyce, her voice a fragile whisper, but he lost himself inside of it. These conversations held the faint echo of a long-buried family secret. One quiet afternoon, an act of profound kindness cemented their bond. Joyce entered to find Matilda weeping silently, clutching a faded photograph of a young woman Joyce had never seen before. Instead of quietly retreating as protocol would dictate, Joyce knelt by her chair, offering a comforting hand. She didn't speak, but her presence offered a powerful silent solace, a moment of shared humanity that was priceless in its sincerity. It was a gesture of true love and empathy. This growing affection between the matriarch and the maid did not go unnoticed. While it provided Joyce with much-needed spiritual sustenance, it also stirred a pot of jealousy and suspicion among other staff members. More perilously, it was a dynamic that Frederick Olson was utterly incapable of interpreting correctly. He could only view this gentle bond through his own dark, transactional lens, a catastrophic misreading of the situation. The secret bond they created was a testament to the fact that connection can bloom in the most unlikely of places. It was a relationship built on mutual respect and a shared understanding of loneliness. Matilda saw in Joyce the integrity and grace the rest of her family lacked. This respect, this secret friendship, would inadvertently play a crucial role in the unfolding drama, a catalyst for both Frederick's cruelty and the ultimate shocking revelation to come. What Frederick saw as a calculated move in a game of inheritance was, in fact, a simple and beautiful friendship. This misinterpretation was not just a mistake, it was the key that would unlock his most monstrous behavior. He was about to punish Joyce for her greatest virtue, believing it to be her most cunning sin. This terrible judgment would propel them all towards a life-changing and deeply emotional climax. Frederick Olson was a keen observer, but his vision was profoundly distorted by the prism of his own cynicism. He watched the gentle interactions between Joyce and his grandmother, but he did not see friendship, he saw a hostile takeover in slow motion. In the world of this powerful billionaire, every act of kindness was a calculated investment. Every gentle word, a carefully placed stepping stone toward a hidden agenda. His mind simply had no framework for genuine, selfless affection. He catastrophically misinterpreted Joyce's kindness as the most sophisticated form of manipulation he had ever encountered. This wasn't a woman comforting an elder, this was a predator, the humble maid, grooming the family's vulnerable matriarch. He became convinced she was positioning herself to be included in his grandmother's will, a final clever gambit in her supposed scheme to get a piece of the Olson fortune. The thought filled him with a cold, righteous fury. This twisted conclusion was the final piece of proof he needed to justify his escalating aggression. It cemented her status in his mind as a dangerous and cunning adversary, a wolf hiding in the sheep's clothing of a service uniform. The drama he had been imagining was now, to him, a confirmed reality. Any lingering sliver of doubt was extinguished, replaced by the ironclad certainty of a man who believes he has uncovered a terrible conspiracy. His heart, already a fortress, pulled up its final drawbridge. His resolve to expel her from the mansion hardened from a paranoid desire into a strategic necessity. He would not stand by and watch this manipulator sink her claws any deeper into his family. He felt a surge of perverse protectiveness, believing he was saving his grandmother from a heartless opportunist. The profound irony that he himself was the most heartless person in the equation was a truth he was completely blind to. He was about to enact a cruel revenge for a crime that was never committed. He began to meticulously plan her public destruction. It was not enough to simply dismiss her, that would be too quiet, too merciful. She needed to be utterly humiliated, her reputation shredded so completely that she would never recover. He decided the upcoming formal family dinner would be the perfect stage for this execution. He would unmask her in front of the entire clan, turning her shame into a spectator sport. It was a plan born of pure, unadulterated cruelty. This decision was the point of no return. Frederick, convinced of his own righteousness, was about to commit an act so vile it would trigger a cosmic recoil. He believed he was closing the book on the Joyce problem, but he was actually writing the prologue to a much larger, more shocking story. His hardened heart was leading him to orchestrate a moment that would not just be life-changing for her, but would ultimately shatter the very foundations of his own world. He saw her as a threat to his inheritance, but the real threat was his own profound lack of humanity. He was about to attack the one person who embodied the grace and integrity his family had long since lost. The stage was set for a terrible confrontation, a deeply emotional event that would serve as the catalyst for an unbelievable plot twist, proving that destiny has a flair for the dramatic and a deep sense of irony. The grand dining room of the Olson mansion was a theater of passive aggression, glittering with crystal and polished silver. The entire family, a collection of elegantly dressed sharks, was assembled for their ritualistic formal dinner. Joyce Mills, ever the professional, moved with a silent grace, serving the main course, oblivious to the fact that she was the evening's main event. Then, Frederick Olson rose, tapping a knife against his glass. A chilling silence descended. The performance was about to begin. "Friends, family," he started, his voice a cold, clear bell of authority that commanded immediate attention. He let his gaze drift over each of his relatives before it landed, with the precision of a sniper, on Joyce. I feel it is my duty to inform you that we have been harboring a viper in our home. A gold digger of the highest order. A collective theatrical gasp rippled through the room. The drama he had promised his co-conspirators had arrived right on schedule. He then unleashed a torrent of cruel, carefully rehearsed accusations. He painted a vivid picture of Joyce as a master manipulator, twisting her kindness to his grandmother into a sinister plot to secure a fortune. He spoke of her son as a pawn in her despicable game. He stripped her of her dignity, word by painful word, all while she stood frozen, the heavy silver platter in her hands, her face a canvas of pure, uncomprehending shock. She was being publicly and brutally humiliated. The climax of his performance was timed to perfection. With a sharp nod, he summoned his lawyer, who stepped forward out of the shadows like a grim reaper in a tailored suit. He presented Joyce with a sheaf of legal documents. "You will submit yourself and your son to a DNA test," Frederick boomed, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. "Your pathetic scheme to fabricate an heir is officially over." It was the ultimate power play, a public shaming designed to leave her utterly broken. The raw, emotional wound he inflicted on her was visible to everyone. Her face, pale and stricken, was a testament to his cruelty. His relatives, the very ones who had pushed him to this, now looked on with a vile mixture of feigned sympathy and gleeful satisfaction. They were witnessing the total annihilation of a poor working woman by their billionaire patriarch, and they savored every second of it. This was the Olson way: absolute, merciless power. But in that moment of deepest shame, as she stood there being psychologically flayed, a tiny, unbreakable core of strength within her refused to shatter. She didn't cry. She didn't scream or protest. She simply absorbed the blow, her eyes, though filled with pain, holding a flicker of something he could not extinguish. He thought this was the final act, the end of her story. He could not have been more wrong. This was the trigger for a life-changing surprise. This calculated act of cruelty was Frederick's gravest mistake. He believed he was demonstrating his power, but he was actually revealing his profound weakness and moral bankruptcy. The legal papers he served were not just a demand for a DNA test, they were a signed confession of his own character. He had set the stage for a shocking plot twist, one that would be orchestrated not by him, but by the immutable power of the truth. In the suffocating silence that followed Frederick's verbal assault, the entire family watched the humiliated Maid, their eyes hungry for her collapse. They anticipated a hysterical outburst, a torrent of tears, a desperate plea for mercy, the kind of messy, satisfying drama that would validate their own sense of superiority. What they received instead was a moment of quiet, powerful defiance that left them utterly stunned. Joyce Mills did not break. She breathed. She lifted her chin, her gaze cutting through the room's toxic atmosphere to meet Frederick's directly. Her eyes were not filled with hatred, but with a deep, sorrowful clarity. "I will take the test," she stated, her voice impossibly steady. It was not the whisper of a defeated woman, but the clear, unwavering statement of someone with nothing to hide. It was not a surrender, it was an acceptance of his challenge, a powerful countermove in his cruel game. A current of disbelief rippled through the room. Even Frederick, for a fleeting second, seemed taken aback. He had prepared for a fight, for chaos, for an emotional scene that would cast him as the calm, rational authority figure. Her composure was a strategic disruption, a quiet act of rebellion that subtly shifted the power dynamic. It was a shocking response, one that hinted at a strength he had completely underestimated in this woman he considered a nobody. With a hand that did not tremble, she reached out and accepted the legal papers from the lawyer. She held them not as a symbol of her shame, but as a key to her vindication. In that moment of supreme grace under fire, she was more regal than anyone in that room. Her integrity was an invisible crown, her dignity an impenetrable shield. The rich man, poor woman narrative was suddenly far more complex than anyone had anticipated. This quiet acceptance was an act of profound courage, driven by the fierce, protective love she had for her son. This was never about the Olson fortune, it was about his honor, his future, his right to live without the stain of this vile accusation. She would walk through this fire for him, endure this public crucifixion to ensure his name was cleared. It was the ultimate act of a mother's true love. Frederick was left momentarily speechless, the triumphant finale of his speech falling flat. He had won, hadn't he? He had forced her into a corner. And yet, her reaction left a strange, unsettling feeling in its wake. It was the quiet, unnerving impressiveness of an unbreakable spirit. A tiny, insidious seed of doubt had been planted in his mind, though he would not yet admit it to himself. Destiny had just made its first unexpected move. Her agreement to the DNA test was not the end he had envisioned, but the start of a process he could not control. The truth, once invited, does not care for the wealth or power of its host. It simply arrives. Her quiet confidence was the first sign that the emotional, life-changing truth of this story was far different and far more explosive than the simple lie he had chosen to believe. The day of the sample collection was as grim and clinical as Frederick had intended. The air in the private clinic was sterile, the silence broken only by the rustle of papers and the low murmur of the legal teams. Joyce was there with her son, her face a mask of resolute calm, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions raging within her. Frederick observed from a distance, a silent, domineering presence, ensuring his will was done to the letter. It was the peak of his cruel, calculated drama. The moment the DNA swabs were sealed, catalogued, and dispatched to the laboratory, Frederick executed the final brutal phase of his plan. As Joyce was preparing to leave with her son, he approached, his face an unreadable mask of cold indifference. "Your services at the Olson estate are no longer required," he stated, the words as sharp and sterile as a surgeon's scalpel. He didn't just fire her, he excommunicated her from his world, right there in the clinic's impersonal waiting room. The cruelty of the act was breathtaking in its thoroughness. He had her escorted from the premises immediately, not even permitting her to return to her small staff quarters to collect her personal belongings. A security detail was dispatched to pack up her life in cardboard boxes, a final dehumanizing gesture. In the space of a few minutes, she went from being a humiliated employee to a homeless single mother, cast out onto the street with nothing but her son's hand in hers. All her simple, beautiful dreams of a stable home, of a good school for her son, of a life free from fear were shattered into a million pieces on the cold, indifferent pavement outside the clinic. Every ounce of her hard work, her unwavering kindness, her quiet integrity had led to this. To be disposed of like trash, her reputation in ruins. It was a life-changing moment of absolute devastation, a truly soul-crushing, emotional blow. She stood at the grand gates of the Olson estate for the last time, watching them close with a grim finality. The life she had known was gone. The shock was a physical force, a weight that pressed down on her, threatening to suffocate her. This was the ultimate victory of the rich man-poor woman power dynamic. He had won. He had erased her completely, leaving her and her son utterly defeated, with their dreams shattered around them like broken glass. From the leather-clad interior of his departing limousine, Frederick glanced in the rearview mirror, catching a final glimpse of her small, forlorn figure. A cold sense of triumph washed over him. He had purged the threat, restored order, and protected his legacy. He drove away, utterly confident in his victory, completely oblivious to the shocking plot twist that was now silently incubating in a petri dish. The results of that DNA test were a ticking time bomb, and destiny was about to light the fuse. He believed he was driving toward a future secured by his own ruthless actions. In truth, he was driving headfirst into a wall of truth that would shatter his world far more completely than he had just shattered hers. The end of her employment was not the end of the story. It was the quiet before a storm of revelation, A storm that would bring with it a surprise so profound it would change the meaning of everything. As Joyce reeled from the hammer blows of being fired and rendered homeless, a new front of attack was opened against her, this one from within the ranks of her former peers. A fellow staff member named Clara, a woman whose heart was curdled with jealousy over Joyce's quiet competence and the genuine affection the matriarch, Matilda, had shown her, saw a golden opportunity. With Joyce gone, Clara could finally position herself as the most trusted servant, and she would do it by desecrating Joyce's memory. She became the chief apostle of Frederick's narrative, spreading vicious, embellished rumors throughout the staff quarters. Her whispers were a poison that spread with terrifying speed. She claimed she had personally witnessed Joyce pocketing small, valuable items, that she had overheard Joyce on the phone, laughing about her brilliant plan to ensnare the billionaire. Each lie was a carefully crafted dagger, designed to assassinate the character of a woman who could no longer defend herself. The staff, a community already living in fear of their volatile employer, eagerly embraced Clara's fabrications. It was far safer to demonize the outcast than to question the judgment of the man who signed their paychecks. Overnight, Joyce Mills was transformed from a respected colleague into a cautionary tale. The friendship she thought she had built, the quiet camaraderie of shared work, all of it evaporated, replaced by scorn and righteous condemnation. Her isolation was now absolute and complete. Her phone, once a source of comfort, became a vector for hate. Cruel text messages and voicemails from anonymous numbers confirmed that the poison had spread beyond the mansion walls. She was no longer just unemployed, she was unemployable, her name and reputation dragged through the mud. The professional world she had navigated with such integrity was now closed to her, its doors barred by lies. The drama had followed her out into the world, relentless and suffocating. This betrayal by her peers was, in many ways, a deeper and more painful wound than Frederick's direct assault. His cruelty was that of a declared enemy, an expected evil. But this was the shunning of her own community, a twisting of the knife by those she had considered allies. It was a profoundly emotional blow that made her question her own ability to judge character, to trust anyone at all. It was a deeper level of being humiliated. She was now utterly alone, adrift on a sea of animosity. Every support system she had was gone, kicked out from under her. She was a pariah, a ghost haunting the periphery of a world that had violently rejected her. This total isolation was the final stage of her destruction, or so it seemed. She had no way of knowing that this painful solitude was merely a prelude to a shocking surprise, a twist of destiny that was drawing nearer with every passing hour. The web of lies spun by Clara was designed to ensure Joyce would never rise again. It was a final vicious kick to a woman who was already down. But the truth of the DNA test was coming, and it was a truth so powerful it would not only exonerate Joyce, but would also expose the petty, cruel hearts of those who had so eagerly condemned her. A quiet revenge was brewing, one she hadn't even asked for. With the last of her meager savings dwindling and every door slammed shut in her face, Joyce Mills and her son found themselves in the sterile, impersonal confines of a city shelter. This was the nadir, the absolute lowest point of her life, a harsh, fluorescent-lit reality she never in her worst nightmares imagined she would inhabit. The sheer, crushing weight of her circumstances pressed down on her, making it hard to draw a full breath. This was her dark night of the soul. She would lie awake on the thin, lumpy mattress, long after her son had drifted off to an innocent sleep, and stare into the oppressive darkness. Frederick Olson's cruel words, Clara's vicious lies, the cold silence from former friendship, all played on a torturous loop in her mind. Every principle she had lived by, honesty, kindness, hard work, seemed to be a fool's errand. Her goodness had been rewarded with nothing but pain, ruin, and utter desolation. Her faith in the fundamental fairness of the world, a faith she had clung to through years of hardship, was now shattered. The world was not just. It was a brutal, rigged game where the powerful and cruel, like the billionaire, always won. The rich man, poor woman story didn't have a happy ending. It ended here, in a homeless shelter, with a broken spirit and a future that was a terrifying, formless void. Her sense of defeat was absolute. The most profound agony came from looking at her sleeping child. His peaceful face, so full of trust, was a dagger in her heart. She had failed him. She had been unable to shield him from the fallout of her own destruction. The shame of that failure was a deeper wound than any public humiliation. It was a deeply personal, emotional crisis that struck at the core of her identity as a mother. She felt as though her very soul was broken. Despair was a cold, heavy cloak that threatened to suffocate her. All her resilience, the quiet strength that had carried her through so much, felt like it had finally been exhausted. She had been stripped of her job, her home, her reputation, and now her hope. It truly felt like the end of her story, a tragic tale where the villain sails off into the sunset, leaving the heroine to perish in the wreckage he created. But even in this suffocating darkness, one tiny, indomitable spark remained the fierce, primal force of her love for her son. It was the one thing they couldn't take from her. For his sake, she had to endure. She had to find a way to crawl out of this abyss, even if she had no idea how. This moment of ultimate despair was a life-changing crucible, forging her in a fire. She did not know she could survive, preparing her for a plot twist she could not imagine. She did not know it, but her story was not over. This darkest moment was not a conclusion, it was a transition. It was the falsa derota, the point where all seems lost before destiny intervenes. The pain and ruin she was experiencing were not the result of her kindness, but the necessary shadow that had to fall before an impossibly bright and shocking dawn could break. Just as Joyce was scraping the very bottom of her despair, a gleaming black town car, so out of place it looked like a spaceship, pulled up to the curb outside the gritty city shelter. From it emerged Mr. Abernathy, the Olson family's senior lawyer, his face a mask of grim, unreadable purpose. His presence was a tremor in the force, a sign that the narrative had taken an unexpected turn. He bypassed the front desk with an air of grave urgency, his mission far too sensitive for pleasantries. He had bypassed Frederick Olson completely. This was an act of insubordination, so profound it could only mean one thing: his instructions were coming from a higher authority, one even the mighty Frederick could not defy. He was acting on the explicit, unalterable protocols laid out in the last will and testament of the late Patriarch Frederick Olson Sr. In his hand, he carried a single heavily sealed manila envelope. Inside was not just a lab report, but a verdict. This envelope contained the results of the DNA test, but the findings had triggered a secret, secondary phase of the analysis. A series of genetic cross-references against a secured Olson family database. This wasn't just about paternity anymore. The scope had widened to encompass the entire lineage, the very history of the family. The contents of this envelope were not a minor correction, they were a historical cataclysm. The drama was about to escalate exponentially. This sealed verdict was by legal design a narrative bomb. It was created by the old Patriarch to be a failsafe, a posthumous correction for a great, secret wrong he had committed in his life. Its purpose was not to adjust the family tree, but to uproot it entirely and replant it in its proper soil. The entire story of the Olson dynasty, their line of succession, their very identity, was about to be rewritten by the silent, scientific truth contained within that envelope. Mr. Abernathy's solemn task was to deliver this shocking sealed verdict directly into Frederick's hands, to witness the moment the truth was finally revealed. The document was a surprise that had lain dormant for decades, a plot twist conceived by a dead man, waiting for the right catalyst to bring it to life. Frederick's own cruelty had, with perfect irony, provided that catalyst. He had unwittingly triggered his own father's final secret confession. The lawyer's arrival marked the story's critical turning point. The power dynamic, so heavily skewed in Frederick's favor, was about to be inverted with the force of a tectonic shift. The humble, homeless maid, at her absolute lowest ebb, was the unsuspecting epicenter of a life-changing revelation. That simple envelope held a truth that would redefine the meaning of the words family secret and heir for the Olson family forevermore. The wheels of a long-delayed justice, set in motion decades ago by a man filled with regret, were now turning. The quiet ticking sound was the countdown to an explosion of truth that would shatter lies, humble the arrogant, and elevate the worthy. The entire sordid tale was about to be turned on its head in a way that was not just shocking, but bordered on the miraculous. It was an act of destiny. Mr. Abernathy found Frederick in his late father's grand, wood-paneled study, a room that had always felt more like a shrine to power than a place of work. He presented the sealed envelope with a somber formality. Frederick accepted it with a dismissive, triumphant sneer. This was it, the final official confirmation of his victory, the black and white proof he would use to crush any lingering sympathy for the maid. He tore open the seal, his eyes hungry for vindication. He scanned the document, his gaze flicking past the scientific jargon, searching for the single conclusive line. He found it, his breath caught in his throat. The world around him seemed to dissolve into a silent, blurry hum. The report was definitive, its conclusion absolute. Joyce Mills's son was not his, but that was a footnote. The true bombshell, the sentence that made the universe tilt on its axis, was in the secondary analysis, the part he never knew existed. The lab, following the arcane but legally binding protocols of his father's estate, had run a full mitochondrial DNA comparison against the entire Olson genetic database. The result was not just a surprise, it was a logical and biological impossibility that was nevertheless true. The test proved, with a certainty that defied belief, that Joyce Mills herself, the woman he had just destroyed, was the secret, unacknowledged, firstborn daughter of his own father. The paper trembled in his hand. Joyce, his sister. The humiliated maid was his half-sister. And the legal addendum attached to the report, a direct excerpt from his father's will, was even more devastating. It stated, in cold, unbreakable legal terms, that should this lost daughter ever be found, she was to be recognized as the true primary heir to the entire Olson fortune. He, Frederick, the proud scion, was instantly demoted. His kingdom was not his. The sneer on his face had long since melted away, replaced by a ghastly pale mask of horrified disbelief. The DNA test he had deployed as a weapon of mass destruction had detonated in his own hands. This wasn't just a plot twist, it was the complete and utter annihilation of his identity. The family secret was a secret he never even knew to look for. The rich man, poor woman dynamic had been a lie. It was a story of a brother tormenting his unknown and more powerful sister. He collapsed into his father's immense leather chair, the document fluttering to the floor like a dead leaf. The silence in the study was absolute, a crushing weight. Everything, his name, his power, his birthright, his entire sense of self, was a fraud. He had spent his life protecting a legacy that, by rights, belonged to the very woman he had just cast out into the darkness. It was a shocking, emotional, and brutally life-changing revelation. This was the ultimate irony, a stroke of cosmic justice so perfect it was almost poetic. His own paranoia, his cruelty, his obsession with the purity of his bloodline had led him directly to this moment of ruin. He had searched for a false heir, and in the process, had discovered the true one. And he had treated her like dirt. The weight of that truth was a mountain crashing down upon him. A wave of guilt so potent, it felt like a physical illness washed over Frederick, churning in his stomach and stealing the air from his lungs. The full, horrifying panorama of his cruelty toward Joyce's own sister unspooled in his mind's eye. Every condescending word, every sneer of disdain, every calculated act of humiliation now felt like a self-inflicted wound. The architect of the drama was now its chief victim, trapped in a prison of his own making. But hot on the heels of that crushing guilt came a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. This fury, however, was not directed outward at his newfound sister, but inward at his own family. He saw it all with a sudden sickening clarity, the subtle manipulations of his cousins, their insincere words of encouragement, their constant stoking of his paranoia. They weren't just being opportunistic. They knew, they must have known this family secret was a possibility, a ghost in their history, and they had used him as a weapon to eliminate the threat. The realization that he had been a pawn, a willing puppet in their vile scheme to disinherit his own sister, was a betrayal more profound than any he had ever experienced in the corporate world. He had prided himself on his strategic mind, his ability to see all the angles, yet he had been played for a fool by his own blood. His obsessive quest to protect the family name had led him to commit the ultimate sin against it. A single desperate thought consumed him, overriding everything else. He had to find Joyce. This was no longer about the fortune, the empire, or the title of heir. This was about a basic, primal human need to atone. He had to look his sister in the eye and beg for a forgiveness he was terrifyingly certain he did not deserve. It was an urge so powerful, so urgent, that it felt like a matter of life and death. He bolted from the study, leaving the world-shattering test results on the floor, a testament to his ruin. He ran from the mansion, a man stripped bare of his arrogance and pride, propelled only by a desperate, frantic energy. He didn't know where she was, what shelter she had found, but he swore to himself he would move heaven and earth to find her. The hunt was on, not for an enemy, but for a chance at redemption. The mighty billionaire, once the epitome of cold, calculating control, was now a man completely undone, a raw nerve of shame and regret. His frantic race through the city was more than a physical journey, it was a pilgrimage. It was the painful, necessary first step on a life-changing road toward finding his own lost humanity. A different kind of love story was about to begin, not one of romance, but of a brother's desperate quest to earn his sister's forgiveness. He had orchestrated what he thought would be his final victory, a moment of ultimate power. Instead, destiny had handed him his most profound defeat, a shocking lesson in humility. The only thing that mattered now was finding Joyce before the weight of his own monstrous actions crushed him completely. He had to try to fix the unfixable. After a desperate, resource-fueled search, Frederick's investigators located Joyce at a crowded downtown shelter. He arrived unannounced, his expensive suit a jarring sight in a place defined by poverty and quiet desperation. He saw her across the bustling cafeteria, standing in line for a bowl of soup, her face etched with a weariness that cut him to the core. The chasm between her current reality and her rightful status as the Olson heir was a physical blow, a visual testament to his monstrous cruelty. He knew in that instant that a quiet, private apology would be an insult, a drop of water on a raging fire. The humiliation he had inflicted on her was public, and so his atonement had to be as well. He strode into the center of the room, the noise of the cafeteria slowly dying down as people took in the sight of this powerful, out-of-place man. He called her name, his voice thick with an emotion no one there had ever associated with a billionaire, raw, unfiltered remorse. Then, in a gesture so stunning it silenced the entire room, he fell to his knees on the grimy linoleum floor. The great Frederick Olson, a man who commanded boardrooms and moved markets, was kneeling before the humble Maid he had tried to destroy. It was an act of complete and total surrender, a public dismantling of his own pride. The power dynamic of the rich man-poor woman story had just been spectacularly and irrevocably inverted. "I know," he choked out, the words torn from his throat, tears streaming freely down his face for the first time in his adult life. "Joyce, sister, I know everything." In front of an audience of the city's most forgotten souls, he confessed his sins. He laid bare his family's lies, their decades of deceit, and his own blind arrogance. He told them all that this woman, standing in a soup line, was the true and rightful head of the Olson family. It was a shocking, unbelievable public testimony. His apology was not an excuse, it was a raw and brutal self-indictment. He owned every piece of his cruelty, his blindness, his unforgivable actions. Then, he made an offer that sent a wave of gasps through the crowd. He didn't just offer her the entire Olson empire, her birthright. He offered her his servitude, his life, his future. "It is all yours," he wept. "As it should have been. All I ask, all I beg of you, is your forgiveness." Joyce stood frozen, the world spinning around her. The architect of her deepest pain was at her feet, offering her a kingdom. This was the ultimate plot twist, a moment so surreal, so profoundly emotional and heart-aching, that it felt like a dream. Destiny had delivered a surprise so monumental, so completely life-changing, that she could barely process it. The entire room held its breath, waiting for the verdict of the queen they never knew they had. He had taken everything from her, and now he was offering her everything and more. This was not just about money or power. This was a man's soul laid bare, a desperate plea for a redemption he clearly believed he could not find on his own. Her response would not only seal her own future, but would also determine whether his fractured humanity could ever be made whole again. Joyce Mills looked down at the weeping, broken man on the floor. In his face, she no longer saw the arrogant monster who had humiliated her, but a lost soul, a brother she never knew, drowning in a sea of his own making. A profound sense of compassion, a virtue that had survived every trial, rose within her. With a grace that silenced the entire room, she reached down and offered him her hand. "Get up, Frederick," she said, her voice soft but imbued with an undeniable authority. Her forgiveness was not a grand declaration. It was a simple, quiet act that was more powerful than any speech. She had every reason to demand revenge, to let him kneel, to savor the reversal of fortunes. But that was his way, not hers. In that moment of choosing grace over grievance, she proved that her true power was never tied to a bank account or a legal title. Her power was, and always had been, her unshakable character. This was her ultimate victory. The story of the long-lost heir and the repentant billionaire became a legend in the city. Joyce, embracing her new role as the head of the Olson family, managed the transition with a wisdom and poise that stunned the corporate world. She was not just a figurehead, she was a true leader, her innate kindness now fortified by a core of steel forged in the fires of her ordeal. The DNA test had revealed her identity, but her trials had revealed her strength. A truly and deeply redeemed Frederick became her most loyal and trusted advisor. He dedicated himself to helping her navigate the treacherous landscape of their family's empire, working tirelessly to undo the damage his own arrogance had caused. A new, unique, and powerful love story began to unfold between them. It was not a tale of romance, but of a profound, unbreakable bond between siblings, built on the rubble of a terrible family secret and cemented by the miracle of forgiveness. Together, they ushered in a new era for the Olson name. They transformed the company from a ruthless corporate predator into a force for good, focusing on ethical practices and large-scale philanthropy. Joyce's son, the little boy whose very existence had triggered this incredible drama, was raised in a world of unconditional love and security. A world his mother had earned for him not with schemes, but with her unwavering goodness. In the end, this incredible, emotional, and heart-aching saga was a testament to the mysterious workings of destiny. It was a story that proved that the most shocking plot twist can lead to the most beautiful resolutions, and that true love in all its forms, a mother's for her child, a sister's for her brother, is the most powerful, redemptive, and life-changing force in the universe. The humble Maid had not just claimed her inheritance, she had healed her family's soul. In a world that often rewards cruelty, Joyce's story is a powerful and emotional reminder that our character is the one fortune no one can ever take away from us. It proves that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way to the light, often with a shocking and beautiful sense of justice. If you also believe that kindness is a superpower, and that a person's true worth is measured by their heart, then you've found your place. Subscribe to our channel and join a community that celebrates stories of the human spirit's incredible power. Now let's create a wave of positivity together. Do these 3 things. 1. Hit that like button as a sign of respect for Joyce's unbreakable strength, helping this message of hope reach more people. 2. Go to the comments right now and answer this specific question. At what exact moment in this story did you feel the strongest emotion? 3. Share this video with just one person who needs a powerful reminder that their current struggle is not their final destination. And while you wait for our next upload, know that our channel is a treasure chest of emotional stories just like this one. Explore our older videos and discover other unforgettable journeys that will touch your heart. Finally, to ensure you don't miss out on any of the incredible new stories we are preparing to tell, activate that notification bell. You won't want to be left out of the next emotional roller coaster. We can't wait to see you there.